Hi, it's Helen Tarrant. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. Today we're going to talk about sale and lease back. So I'm going to show you one of the examples of the properties that's going to be a sale and lease back and explain the concept of what it is. Now, the video will have Stephen on the road because he's on the road this week. Being so close to Christmas, I've totally flat out with lots and lots of files of helping our clients close deals before Christmas. So he's showing us some properties there, a warehouse property with a developer wanting a lease back. So the concept of a lease back is that the vendor, which is the owner occupier of a property, wants to sell that property so that he becomes the tenant, and he's willing to sign a 5 or 7 or 10-year lease sometimes so that he could be there and secure his tenure there as a tenant while he sold the property. Now, you might wonder why, and they might be a little bit suspicious why he wants to do that, but a lot of businesses do that. It is actually quite normal in the commercial industry. So a lot of times you'll find that it happens to health tenants, allied health tenants, dentists, or medical centers, because the doctors want to retire or they have a partnership split. With trade, it happens a lot. So for example, if the dad is in the trade and he owns the warehouse or the property that he's now retiring, might be his only source of retirement, and as such he is then wanting to sell it, but his sons or his other key staff wants to continue to work there, so they're willing to sign a longer lease there and secure the property because it's suitable for their needs. Alternatively, the business wants to expand, so they might be looking at other locations, or that they want to put money into marketing, sales, getting new staff members on there, developing another part of their business, so they sell it, so they've got a whole chunk of money there, so they can also pay the rent, but they also have money to develop the business and make the business more successful. So done properly, sale and lease back is actually quite secure and very set and forget type of property. So there's nothing to be scared about as long as you know what kind of due diligence you're going to cover off. So we're going to cover off some points on due diligence, and I'll show you a video of what it is so that you get to understand how it all works. So for example, you have a property, let's just use a round number of $1 million. So the property is worth $1 million and the vendor wants to sell that property. So normally he goes out and get an appraisal from the agent. Now the agent might say, look, the current market return or the yield is 7%. So the rent you should be paying is $70,000. And then you should pay all the outgoings on top of that, which you've been doing, up until now. And then there's the rental increases per year, however much the market is. Might be 2%, might be 3%, or 4%, depends on where it's located. And then essentially they put the property on the market and they offer a 5-year lease. Now the lease itself is not constructed until they have an offer on the property, and then the terms of a lease is knocked together as part of the due diligence process and as part of the formation of the contract. So there's a defined term in terms of outgoings, of what is covered in the outgoings, who pays what, the maintenance of the property, and also the current rent, as well as looking at any option period as well. So don't expect to find a lease straight away. They'll also give you the basics in terms of a property memorandum, in terms of information. But the other really great thing about having a sale and leaseback property is that you will find that the property is going to be taken care of really, really well to a high standard, because they're owner occupiers for all this time. They're not going to have a leaking roof. They're not going to have a wall that's cracking. They're not going to have a property that's going to be falling down when they're working on it, and they've got their staff there. So you can be almost guaranteed that the property is at a higher level and it's been taken care of if it's their own. So everything in that aspect should be really good. So your main concern is actually, number one, market rent. So is the tenant going in there in the future, being the vendor, going to be market rent? Number two, you're going to look at what the market return is and what the true market return is. So sometimes the agent goes, oh, maybe with a 5-year lease you can sell it for 6.5 instead of 7. Or if the market's at 7, you want to be insisting on that. And thirdly, of course, looking at the length of the lease, whether they're offering a 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years. If they're offering a 3 years for a lease back, that's a little bit light. I like to see a 5 years, potentially 7 years, but 5 years is a good point for a lease back property. And of course, then we need to look at the quality of the property and the tenant. So if they're a professional type tenant, they're well established in the industry, and the property is taken care of, then there's no issues at all. But if there's some minor issues, you want to iron that out through the due diligence process and through the contracting process. But you need to really do your due diligence diligence on the market rent, because sometimes that market rent can be a little bit inflated, which means that you could be potentially paying 10, 20, 30,000 or even 50 or $100,000 more. So you really got to do your due diligence around that. And that's one of the things that we do when we look at a sale and leaseback, is that true market rent, and we get comparisons. We look at previous valuation reports, we talk to other agents to establish what the market rent is, and then we go back and make a proposal based on what we think the market rent is, and then whether the vendor agrees in principle or not. So when you're putting a sale and leaseback property together, sometimes the property itself, it's a video I'm going to show, is a raw shell because it's from a developer. So they are a property that they are developing. They've got lots of projects around the area. They're choosing one property or one unit in the complex they're building, and they're putting in lots that their own fit out, and they're basically storing all of their stock, and it becomes their office and operation room, and that's totally fine. So when you go and visit it, it might be nothing to visit, and it might take 2 or 3 years before we actually get that have that happening, before the vendor has gone out and fitted it out and done everything to it. So but in the meantime, as long as they're paying rent and as long as they're working out of there and it's functional for them, that's all it matters. So it doesn't have to be a spick and span. Now if you're buying a property with an existing tenant already in there, so there might be a tenant that is already operational, like a tenant that has a maybe, let's say they're in construction, or maybe they're professional tenants like an architecture firm or a media company or even a trade business, they might already have all of their stuff in there. Well, if that's the case, then it's really about checking out the property and seeing how well the property has been taken care of as well. So really, the whole point of a sale and leaseback is that you really communicate with the vendor through that process, so that they get to know you as a landlord, and that you build a relationship during that period, so that it becomes amicable and workable into the future. Because it's all about working with your tenants, but in this instance, you actually get to understand and see who your tenants are and understand their business prior to actually settling on the property, which can give you a certain level of security than buying a property with a tenant that is not related to the transaction. So check out some of these videos that follow from the inspection. And in the meantime, if you're looking at buying a similar type of property and you want us to handhold you through the process, go to helentarrant.com, contact us, or email me at helen@commercialpropertycashflow.com.au. So yeah, in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. And check out the video after this. Bye.
Alrighty, so this is the development down here in Tingapa. There are 15 sheds in this stage of the development, and the one over in the corner over there is Unit 2, and that is the one that the developer is going to fit out to use to store his own stuff and also as a showroom. Now he's doing the next stage, which is over there, and as part of that he wants to use Unit 2 as a display suite to show what can be done. So it doesn't have to be just an industrial shed, it can be more of a showroom type arrangement as well. Alrighty, we're down here at Unit 7, 224 New Cleveland Road in Tingapa, and this unit is 6.3 metres high to the underside of that beam, and they're doing this one up all shiny sparkly, so it's going to have epoxy flooring, there's a toilet over in the back, mezzanine, LED lights underneath it. It's a tilt slab construction, which means it'll last years and years. All the roof is insulated, and over in that corner is where the fibre optic cable comes in, so it's all set up for new fancy pants internet. I'm down here with Jasha. Say hi to the peoples.
How you doing? Hi people. Hi everyone.
Beautiful. So we're going down to have a look at Unit 2. This one's slightly bigger. There's lots of parking spaces. And this again appears to be a 6.3 metre high unit. It's big enough to fit a truck with shipping containers on it. Easy to load, unload. Proper height roller door for decent access. And this one isn't going to be fitted out to quite the level, so this one's more of your industrial type shed. This one's more for people who actually want to do real work rather than display goods. But again, still built to the same level, and if anybody wanted to, it wouldn't take very much to paint it, put in epoxy floors and make it shiny sparkly.
today what I'm going to share with you is what is a sale and leaseback? What is a sale and leaseback? So sale and leaseback. And why do people do it in the commercial property space? So sale is when the vendor becomes the tenant at the end of the transaction. You as the purchaser becomes the landlord. And as such, you've got a pre-existing relationship with the tenant through the purchase process of doing your commercial transaction. This is very common for medical, trade, and professional services. And the reason for that is that they want to firstly expand their business. They want to have more capital. And they want to have more cash flow. So the reason for that is once they've sold the business, they'll have a chunk of cash where they can have it in their business and they can use it for cash flow in terms of paying their staff, in terms of marketing and really leveraging and growing their business. So it all comes down to business development and business expansion. And sometimes they don't need to own their premise to be able to be and build a successful business, be in that location. And for them, they could actually diversify. So some people may want, it might be a retirement where a dad or a family member might be retiring and he owns the warehouse, but his sons and his other family members or a key staff members working there, but he needs to get the cash out, so he needs to retire. So for whatever those reasons, also sometimes there's a partnership split. So these are the reasons that happens, and that's why you need that happens in a sale and leaseback. But there's a few things you need to actually think about with a sale and leaseback. And one of the things that we need to think about is actually market rent. So is it market rent? This takes time for you to do some research around market rent. Firstly, what is the market return as well? So market yield, or we call it cap rate. And also then we look at the quality of the property. So have they maintained the property? Most of the time when you're buying it from an owner-occupier, you'll realize the property is actually really well maintained. So the quality of the property as well. And then after that, we need to look at the length of the lease. So we're looking at the lease term. So we want to make this equitable for both parties. Yeah. So those are the 4 key terms we look for in a commercial property when we're doing sale leaseback. And ultimately, they can actually be very secure because the leases are usually 5 years plus. And often tenants tend to stay there once they become tenants 5, 10 years going forward because the property actually suits their purpose. They actually just wanted to get the cash out for whatever the business reason is. So there's nothing to be suspicious about this transaction. It is actually about moving forward and making sure to tick off all those 4 criteria so you know as part of your due diligence that this is going to be a secure property moving forward.